I live in a condominium where animals are allowed, but one day my neighbor decided that my dog was scaring the children. She tried everything. She filed complaints, spread rumors, and even tried to change the building's rules. But when the management found out that she was lying, it was a real terror. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that people never know how to keep quiet. If something doesn't directly affect their lives, they still make a point of interfering, just to make sure the world keeps going the way they want it to. This is exactly what happened when I moved into a new condominium with my dog Thor, a golden retriever weighing almost 40 kilos, the most docile being on the face of the earth. He didn't bark for nothing, he didn't bite anyone, he didn't cause a fuss. But, of course, that didn't matter to the creature that lived next door to my house. The first time she appeared was on a seemingly normal morning. The woman appeared out of nowhere, like an NPC programmed to give you a headache. She had the posture of someone who thinks she's in charge of the whole neighborhood, her arms crossed, her eyes squinted, ready to unload a list of demands. Your dog needs to get out of here," was the first thing out of her mouth. No introduction, no good morning, nothing. I stood there, processing the level of absurdity I was hearing. I looked over at Thor, who was lying on the grass, belly up, waiting for a cuddle. Clearly a bloodthirsty monster. I took a deep breath and asked, just to give her a chance to say something that made sense. "What do you mean?" The woman snorted impatiently. "He's very big. The children on the estate get scared." I looked around. The only fear I saw was that of a little 4-year-old girl who was petting Thor while holding a lollipop in her other hand. If that was fear, then I was an astronaut. At that moment, I realized that this wasn't going to be a rational conversation. She didn't want a solution. She wanted to be in charge. The problem? I wasn't going to let her. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the more you ignore someone who wants attention, the more they freak out. And this woman was about to collapse. After the first ridiculous conversation about Thor scaring the children, I just got on with my life. I wasn't going to argue with someone who had clearly invented a problem out of thin air. I thought that would be enough for her to give up, but no. She decided to double down. The first sign that war was declared came 2 days later. I came home and found a piece of paper stuck to my gate. It was an official complaint to the condominium manager. The reason? Large animal posing a safety risk to residents. Resident safety. Thor, who at that very moment was rolling around in the grass trying to bite his own tail, was apparently the biggest danger in this neighborhood. I tore up that paper on the spot, but little did I know that it was only the beginning. The following week, she started recruiting allies. Suddenly, some of the neighbors started looking at me funny, as if I was raising a Bengal tiger in their backyard. Some even came over to comment, in a polite way. So, I hear your dog can be dangerous. Wow, I saw some messages in the condominium group about a very large animal running loose around here. And guess who was spreading those messages? That's right, then came the final blow. She decided to get the condominium management involved. One morning, an employee knocked on my door with the expression of someone who had been forced out of bed earlier than he wanted. He explained that he had received several complaints about my dog and that he needed to investigate. Obviously, the complaint had come from my neighbor, but I wanted to see how far it went. So I called the employee in and let him investigate it himself. Thor, being the real serial killer she said he was, did what any friendly dog would do. He licked the man's shoe, wagged his tail, and brought him a toy. The employee laughed. Well, I'll put in the report that he seems calm. Calmer than this woman's nerves when she saw that her plan had failed. When he left, there she was, standing on the sidewalk with that "it's not over yet" look on her face. She crossed her arms and let out, in the most venomous tone possible, "Do you think you've won?" I didn't answer. I just smiled and threw a little ball for Thor to fetch. And that's how I discovered that she hadn't yet reached the maximum level of madness. The neighbor could have accepted defeat. But no, if there's one thing this kind of person can't stand, it's losing a fight they've invented themselves. And since she couldn't convince me that Thor was a walking danger, she decided to create evidence. The first sign that things were getting out of hand came when I received a report from the condominium saying that my dog had attacked someone. That's right. Thor, the golden retriever who was afraid of thunder and ran away from vacuum cleaners, was now an aggressive animal. I took the paper and went straight to the landlord's office, my patience already at an all-time low. As soon as I entered, he sighed deeply and picked up another sheet of paper from the desk. "You need to see this." And there it was. A supposed official report from a resident saying that my dog had lunged at her and nearly knocked her over. I didn't even have to ask who had written it. What shocked me most was the creativity. The woman had written a real horror movie script. She described how she almost fell to the ground and that she had to run to avoid a serious accident. Imagine the scene. A middle-aged woman desperately running away from a dog that was probably wagging its tail and thinking it was a joke. I crossed my arms and faced the liquidator. Is there any proof here? He snorted and pointed at the street security camera. If something like this had happened, it would have been recorded. Exactly. And that's how, that same afternoon, he pulled up the recordings of the day and time that she had put in the report. Guess what? Nothing happened. The woman walked past my house like any normal human being. Thor was sleeping in the backyard, without even opening his eyes. It was a blatant lie. They called her in to explain, and the spectacle was beautiful. Suddenly she began to stutter, said that perhaps she had confused the days, that perhaps it wasn't that serious. Of course, now that she'd been caught, the story quickly changed. But the best part was when she let go, indignant. But what if it had happened? You can't wait until it's too late. The landlord looked at me. I looked at him. The silence was deafening. After a few seconds, he took the papers, tore them up in front of us and said, "I'm going to delete this complaint from the system," and that was that. The final blow to the campaign against the most dangerous dog in the neighborhood. But instead of giving up, the woman decided to appeal. She was going to make an official complaint to the authorities. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole story, it's that some people just don't know how to give up. When the neighbor realized that she wouldn't be able to take me down inside the condominium, she decided to go to the next level of insanity, calling the authorities. Yes, she called animal control. I found out the hard way, with 2 officers knocking on my door on a Saturday afternoon, while I was watching TV with Thor snoring on the sofa next to me. The most hilarious thing, he didn't even hear the knock on the door. That's because, contrary to what the neighbor said, he wasn't a bloodthirsty monster on alert, but a lazy dog who was frightened by his own shadow. I went to answer the door, and on the other side were 2 animal control officers wearing vests and holding clipboards. One of them sighed before speaking. "We received a report of an aggressive dog in this residence." I took a deep breath. The woman really had no limits. I invited them both in since, unlike her, I had nothing to hide. As soon as they stepped into the living room, Thor woke up, looked at them, wagged his tail, and went back to sleep. The agent looked at the dog, then at me. "Is that the aggressor?" "Yes, the terror of the neighborhood." The other officer already looked annoyed. Clearly it wasn't the first time they'd taken a false report. "Do you mind if we check the yard?" I let them walk around and look at everything. No trace of aggression, no signs of mistreatment, no reason for them to be there. And then she appeared. The neighbor appeared on the sidewalk, with that look of superiority mixed with false concern. She approached as if she had just solved a major social problem. "I hope you're seeing this with your own eyes," she said, crossing her arms. "This animal is a danger to us all." The agents stared at each other. It was clear that one of them was holding back a laugh. One of them closed his clipboard and replied dryly, "Ma'am, there's nothing wrong with this dog. He's not aggressive, there are no legitimate complaints, and, in fact, he seems extremely well cared for." The woman turned pale. It was as if her brain had simply crashed as she realized that all her effort had been for nothing. But, she tried to argue, looking around as if she expected someone to come and support her insanity. Total silence. Not even the neighbors who had previously believed her had the courage to speak up. The officers thanked me and left. But before they got into the car, one of them looked at the neighbor and said, "False reporting is a crime, ma'am. It can result in a fine." That's when she finally collapsed, and I knew she would never bother me again. After the animal control officers left, the neighbor stood there on the sidewalk, her gaze lost on the horizon. I could tell she wasn't processing her defeat very well, perhaps because, for the first time in her life, someone had not only ignored her crazy antics, but had made her embarrass herself in front of everyone. And I could have stopped there. I could have let it go. But, honestly, she didn't deserve a quiet ending. The next morning, while having coffee on the balcony, I had an idea. I took out my cell phone and wrote a message in the condominium group. "Good morning, everyone. As many of you may know, yesterday we had a visit from animal control because of a complaint. I'm happy to report that my dog was found to be absolutely docile and well cared for. But be warned, false reports are a crime and can lead to fines. Let's use our time to improve the neighborhood, not for baseless fights." And I sent it. The response was better than I expected. Neighbors began to comment, some laughing at the situation, others clearly realizing that they had been manipulated. Some sent private messages apologizing for having believed her, and so, little by little, the woman's reputation crumbled. For days she avoided leaving the house. When she finally showed up, she no longer had that air of superiority. Her world had collapsed, and all because she had tried to turn a lazy dog into a murderous beast. But one last detail was still missing. The landlord, who had had enough of her, convened the council to discuss measures against false complaints. And to no one's surprise, she was considered the most troublesome person in the neighborhood. The result? A very nice fine, accompanied by a formal notice saying that if she ever made up complaints again, she could be expelled from the condominium. Ah, the taste of victory. Since then, the neighbor has never looked at me again. She started crossing the street whenever she saw me, avoiding any contact. And the best thing? She never tried to bother Thor again. And what about him? Well, he's still the same. A happy, sleepy, and absolutely harmless dog. The only thing he attacks is a full pot of food. And in the end, the only person who really lost something in this story was her. So, what did you think of the ending? This woman learned the hard way that messing with an innocent dog doesn't work. And if you like this video and want more like it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next video.